And we're back. Not yet. Shut up. This. How's your face, man? How's your face? I know. Damn. Are you kidding me? Are you for serious? Hello, hello. Double tap to live, you guys. I made a mistake and had to end the last one, so I do apologize, but it's good to have a little separation anyways. Okay. We are reading The Myth of Normal. Gross maze. Multiple sclerosis is another autoimmune condition for which personal histories, childhood adversities, and the decisive influence of stress has been extensively studied. The first to describe this illness, the French physician Jean-Martin Charcot, sometimes called the father of modern neurology, proposed in 1872 that MS resulted from long-continued grief and vexation. As with his younger contemporary and fellow medical giant William Osler's insights about rheumatoid arthritis, much information has since accrued to support Charcot's pioneering formulation. A majority of the MS patients had grown up against an unhappy family background, found a 1958 study at 2 Montreal hospitals. Marital discord, broken homes, alcoholism, and lack of parental love and affection were given as reasons for unhappiness. The vast majority had suffered prolonged emotional stress prior to the onset of their diseases. Also salient in triggering relapses were such stresses as worry over financial matters, unhappy home life, increased responsibility, either alone or in combination with such other factors as fatigue, overexertion, overwork, accidents, injuries, and childbirth. A decade later, another study in which Dr. George Engel of the biopsychosocial coinage participated, also concluded that the majority of patients reported psychologically stressful experiences to have preceded the onset of the symptoms that ultimately led to the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. Findings collaborated by family members when available. The evidence just keeps coming. MS patients experiencing significant life stresses were seen to have a nearly quadrupled incidence of disease flare-ups. Finally, a major review of the literature presented at an international conference in Portugal in 2013 found a host of patterns among MS patients, including More unwanted stress or traumatic events occurring between 6 months to 2 years before onset. A cumulative correlation between stress and relapse. After one stressful life event, the relapse risk doubles or triples. After 3 or 4, the risk increases by 5 to nearly sevenfold. Histories of childhood trauma, which are doubled or tripled those of the general population. Physical and sexual abuse histories, ooh, correlation with higher relapse rates. Being less in touch with their emotions in general and therefore less able to protect themselves from stress, and social support mitigating the effect of life stresses. Have a great day. Thanks for coming and spreading some sunshine before you go. Over the years, I have interviewed dozens of people with MS, many of them long before I was aware of such studies. I have yet to find an exception to these general findings. The long continued grief and vexation of which Jean Martin Charcot spoke a century and a half ago factor mightily in the presence and severity of the illness. As in the other autoimmune conditions, in virtually every case, the childhood patterning that led people to be over conscientious, hyper responsible, and emotionally stoic about their own needs was evident, as were stresses preceding the illness, such as interpersonal conflict, family crisis, loss of a relationship, or added duties at work. Hello, hello. Let me get my tea. Yeah, I have a million kids. You're one. Bianca, like Mira, a physician, also had double vision diploma at her first symptom of MS. Now 37, she first experienced it in her 20s while she was stressing herself over her school examinations. Through the years, she told me as we spoke online, she was from a home in Bucharest, and I in Vancouver. All the time that I had the symptom of double vision, I was preparing for exams or a lot of stress in work, professional stress. The other symptoms, I make the connection like numbness and tingling or pins and needles sensation or paralysis happen usually when I have personal problems and emotional problems. Contrary to medical exception, Bianca has made the disease work for her. She has learned to make friends with and allow herself to be instructed by a condition most of us would naturally regard as pure misfortune. I was overcompensating all my life and working hard and trying to people please, she told me. With MS, I finally had a reason to relax and focus on myself. Good morning, good morning. Why the rise of autoimmune diseases? Ugh. You're falling asleep to this with sweet dreams. Genetic explanations missing the mark. The hunt for elusive environmental factors continues. In the modern world, there are bound to be many. I believe, however, that one such factor is salient, ubiquitous, and for the most part, woefully overlooked. Here, the very treatment of inflammation conditions offers an essential, even obvious clue about the origins, a hint that may help resolve the mystery of where in the world these illnesses come from. We physicians frequently dole out large doses of synthesized stress hormones for inflammations of the skin, joints, brains, intestines, lungs, kidneys, and so on. We do so for a good reason. Hormones often alleviate or ameliorate symptoms, albeit with many potentially hazardous side effects. Yet we rarely think to ask ourselves or our patients whether stress itself may, just may, have something to do with the conditions we are treating. There is plenty of evidence for such a view. A recent Swedish study in the Journal of the American Medical Association showed that people with stress-related disorders had significantly greater risk of autoimmune diseases. Tellingly, those who had been treated for their stress-related mental conditions with SSRI type medication, the most widely prescribed class of antidepressants, of which Prozac is probably the most famous, had lower risk for autoimmunity. A clear indication of the body-mind, to use Dr. Candace Pert's phrasing for the interflow of psychology and sociology in humans, and of the role of emotions in illness. Hello, hello. Not only in humans, either. Laboratory mice in a 2013 study were subjected to 3 weeks stress meant to mimic the diversity of stressful events in daily human life. That meant immersing the creatures in cold water, wafting predators' odor in their direction, making them endure bright lights or restraint or isolation, unpredictable stresses of variable duration they could not easily adapt to. The researchers called this chronic variable stress. Mice so exposed were found to be at an elevated risk for pathogenic autoimmunity. In other words, for immune activity directed against the physical self. Life is our current culture, I believe. Makes many of us experimental mice subject to chronic variable stress beyond our control. A necessary caveat. In foregrounding the role of biographical factors in disease, we must be mindful to avoid blame or guilt. Some people see lupus as an external attacker. A British woman with lupus has written, "But I prefer to think I did it to myself. Too much striving, too much living on the edge, too much stress, yet despite the consequences, I wouldn't change how I lived my life." Look at me, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm putting myself to sleep. It is who I am, so this disease is who I am too. There is wisdom in that view, but I also hear an unwarranted self-accusation and an all too characteristic lack of self-compassion. No person is their disease, and no one did it to themselves. Not in any conscious, deliberate, or culpable sense. Disease is an outcome of generations of suffering, of social conditions, of cultural conditioning, of childhood trauma, of sociology bearing the brunt of people's stresses and emotional histories, all interacting with the physical and psychological environment. It is often a manifestation of ingrained personality traits, yes, but that personality is not who we are any more than the illnesses to which it may predispose us. Yet if our British writer's errs in identifying entirely with her disease, she is still skillfully directing us to a profound and fruitful set of questions. Could it be that illness as external attacker does not even exist when it comes to such chronic automutinous conditions as we have looked at in this chapter? What if disease is not in fact a fixed entity but a dynamic process expressive of real lives in concrete situations? What new or old pathways to healing, unthinkable within the prevalent medical view, might follow from such a paradigmatic shift in perspective? Obviously, with an external agent such as the novel coronavirus, we are facing an entirely different challenge. But even there, internal factors and social conditions play a major role in people's vulnerability to the infection. It ain't a thing. Disease as process. Cancer is no more a disease of cells than a traffic jam is a disease of cars. A lifetime study of the internal combustion engine could not help anyone to understand our traffic problems. A traffic jam is due to a failure of the normal relationship between driven cars and their environment and can occur whether they themselves are running normally or not. V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, wrote to fame in the 1990s as the author of the Vagina Monologues, the play Vagina. The play the New York Times called probably the most important piece of political theater of the last decade. Her blockbuster stage success had given rise to a life of activism. A fearless advocate for and defender of women's rights, she has traveled worldwide witnessing the bloody aftermath of mass rape and misogyny brutally in Bosnia and the war-torn Democratic Republic of the Congo. The political is personal for V. In her heart-rending yet triumphant memoir of surviving life-threatening stage 5 uterine cancer in the body of the world, she poses a question of stunning frankness and insight. Do I have grape cancer? Since our original interview, the writer and activist has changed her name to V, eschewing the names personal and familiar given to her by her past grapist father, by whose legacy she does not wish to be defined. Throughout the book, we honor that self-affirming designation. From an early age and over many years, her father sexually violated her, a chronic assault on which was superimposed severe emotional abuse and later terrifyingly physical violence. All the while, her mother, hobbled by the legacy of her own childhood suffering, remained oblivious and or silent. The child Eve felt she was betraying her mom by having an affair with her own father. As a child, when your father invests you, you feel you were the betrayer, she told me in an online interviewer. And my mother hated me for it. She hated me for how much he adored me. Toxic self-blame is one of the torments imposed on by the traumatized child. For much of her life, V loathed herself, as so many victims on early abuse end up doing. How did I get it? She writes about the onset of her cancer. Was it worry every day for 57 years that I wasn't good enough? Was it the pressure to fill Madison Square Garden with 18,000 or the Superdome with 40,000? Was it the line of 200 women repeated in hundreds of small towns for many years? After each performance, after each speech, women lined up to the show me their scars, wounds, warrior tattoos. Was it suburban lawn pesticides? Was it my first husband sleeping with my close friend? Was it sleeping with men who were married? Was it not enough boundaries? Was it too many walls? When I asked her what she thinks now, V prefaced her answer with a laugh, perhaps sardonic. I think it's a combination of all of the above, she said. But I think that if there were one underlying reason why I got sick, it was reckoned I hadn't gone deep enough to processing my own trauma. She then made a profound observation about the nature of illness itself. A disease is not like a thing. It is an energy flow, it is a current. It is evolution or devolution that occurs when you're not awake and connected. And trauma is essentially ruling your life. I think it's such a mistake to identify it as a thing because that makes it hard matter when it's in fact a much more psychological, spiritual, emotional condition. This hard-won perspective raises some unfamiliar, potentially frightful questions. What if, she writes, When you got sick, you weren't a stage of a disease, but in a process. And cancer, just like having your heart broken or getting a new job or going to school, were a teacher. What if rather than being cast out and defined by some terminal category, you were identified as someone in the middle of a transformation that could deepen your soul, open your heart? V's survival of a near terminal diagnosis owed much to the heroic effects and skills of modern medicine, including multiple complex surgeries and chemotherapy. But that's not at all But that's not all that saved her as she sees it. V herself generated a powerful complement to these interventions in the way she approached healing, a willingness to experience disease not as a thing, an external enemy, but as a process that encompasses all of her life, present, past, and future, and ultimately even as a teacher. Beyond the war metaphor, we're used to saying disease as a thing to get rid of or a foe to battle against, as for example in the war on cancer, which war, for the record, has been far more victorious. Someday we tell ourselves with enough research, we as a society will beat cancer and wipe it out. In the meantime, we maintain a tenaciously defiant attitude as expressed in the viral hashtag #FCancer. Our everyday language gives voice to our combative stance. When we hear a friend or a family member courageously battling MS or some other illness, they will either prevail in the struggle or else succumb. And maybe that these marital metaphors are so appealing because they force matches our feelings of anger and despair. Oh, I need a little nappy nap. What's up, Trey? I had a great time at the Comic-Con, Cheyenne, but something happened at it. Oh my gosh, Trey, I missed the Comic-Con. It's March. Wait a second. You're probably not in Seattle, so maybe the Comic-Con's still out here. What happened? Tell us. Good morning, good morning. Tell us what happened, Trey. Are you still in here? Well, I'm going to continue reading, and then hopefully you will bestow on us the experience of what happened, my friend. That does not, however, make them helpful. In a previous work, I quoted the Canadian oncologist Karen Gelman, a leading breast cancer specialist who looks askance at the military depiction of cancer care and research. What happens in the body is a matter of flow. There is input and there is output, she said, and you can't control every aspect of it. We need to understand that flow, know that there are things you can influence and things you can't. It's not a battle, it's a push-pull phenomenon of finding balance and harmony, of kneading the conflicting forces into one dough. I noticed how closely her use of flow mirrors V's language, one woman speaking from medical expertise, the other from hard-earned, subjective sourced insight. That's me. That's me. Hard-earned, subjectively sourced insight. Beyond the declarations of war, there is another, even more popular class of misapprehensions that cloud our view of disease. I have cancer. I have MS. My nephew had ADD. Embedded in each phrase is the unexamined assumption that there is an I or a someone, distinct and independent from the thing called disease, which the I has, as in the statement, I have a flat screen TV, here is my life, and over there is the disease that has encroached upon it. Seen this way, the disease is something external with its own nature, existing independently of the person in whom it shows up. Given where that perspective has gotten us, it is time to consider a new one. We have already glimpsed the countless hormonal, immunological, neurological, molecular, intertracellular, and epigenetic pathways that make our sociology inseparable from our emotional, sociological, spiritual, and social selves. These understanding of trauma and stress as major founts of the process that ultimately came close to killing her is completely aligned with modern science. In a 5-decade-long British study that followed nearly 10,000 people from birth until the age of 50, it was found that early life adversity, abuse, social economic disadvantage, family strife, for example, greatly increased the risk of cancer before the mid-century mark. Women who experienced 2 or more such adversities had a doubled risk by midlife. These findings suggest that cancer risk may be influenced by exposure to stressful conditions and events early on in life, wrote the researchers, once more employing the carefully reticent language of suggest and may. To my clinical sensibilities, concerned as I am with how people fall ill or how and or find healing, such results mirrored over and over in multiple other studies do not suggest they scream for attention. The disorganizing impact of stress hormones on the immune system as a risk for cancer is far from a scientific secret. We have also seen how stress and trauma are prime drivers of inflammation, another central gear in the cancer-causing apparatus. Along parallel lines, girls who are sexually and physically abused have far greater risk in adulthood of endometriosis, a painful and often disabling condition that heightens the risk of ovarian cancer and whose origins perplexed conventional medical thinking. Covered from the mind-body socio-neuroimmunological perspective, the puzzle becomes rather less puzzling. My goodness. When a book has dragons, unicorns, sea monsters, ghost, sorcery, resurrection, flying chariots, seers, and a chosen one, which section of the library can I find this? You can find this probably under, not autobiographies. That's a really good question. What section? Go to the computer and type it into the computer, and it'll probably pop up if they have it. It's called The Myth of Normal. It's a really good book. It's by Gabor Mate. That's Mate. He has a few books that are pretty good. They are trauma, like childhood trauma, ADHD, insight to those kind of things. Or was that a joke? Are you telling me a joke? You can find it in the... I don't know, tell me. I think they were telling me a joke. To reinstate a question essential to our theme, what if we saw illness as an imbalance in the entire organism, not just as a manifestation of molecules, cells, or organs invaded or denatured by pathology? What if we applied the findings of Western research and the medical science in a systems framework, seeking all the connections and conditions that contribute to illness and health? Such a reframing would revolutionize how we practice medicine. Rather than treating disease as a solid entity that imposes its ill will on the body, we'd be dealing with a process, one that can't be extricated from our personal histories and the context and culture in which we live. This change is approach has much recall to the connection between PTSD symptoms and ovarian cancer. Okay. This change in approach has much. I know. I definitely need to get some sleep. Science fiction. Yes, science fiction. That would be. I love that they came onto YouTube to ask us this, but science fiction sounds like a good section for all that stuff. This change in approach has much to recommend it, and not only because it takes interpersonal biology into account. Time is it? 8:20. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to go back to sleep. I don't think the littles would stand it. And not only because it takes interpersonal biology into account, when we cease to view illness as a concrete autonomous thing with a predetermined trajectory, and when we have the proper help and a willingness to look both within and without, we can start to exercise agency in the matter. After all, if disease is a manifestation of something in our lives rather than merely their cruel disruptor, we have options. We can pursue new understandings, ask new questions, perhaps make new choices. We can take our rightful place as active participants in the process rather than its victims, helpless, but for our reliance on medical miracle workers. Disease itself is both a accumulation of what we became and a pointer to how things might unfold in the future. Our emotional dynamics, including our relationship to ourselves, can be among the powerful detriments of the future. An attitude of helplessness and hopelessness at the time of diagnosis, for example, has been shown to exert a marked adverse effect on survival in women with breast cancer even 10 years later. Conversely, a decrease in depressive symptoms is associated with longer survival. Even in a study of women requiring biopsies for cervical abnormalities identified on routine pap smears, those with a dejected view of life before diagnosis were much more likely to find that they received a diagnosis of cancer. In men, the immune system's capability to react to prostate cancer was diminished in those with a tendency to suppress anger. Another prostate study found that social support reduced the risk. Dr. Stephen Cole is a prolific researcher whose work has cast bright light on the disease process. We now know the disease is a long-term process, he told me, a sociological process taking place in our bodies, and how we live influences how quickly that's going to get us at a clinical level. Just double check 1, 2, 3. Oh my gosh. Okay. We made it through 35 minutes. Dang, that's 10 more minutes faster than the last couple nights. It taking 10 minutes or 45 minutes to read 10 pages is literally blowing my mind. It makes me feel very like we are progressing in the right direction, away from the wrong direction. Anywho, I need to eat my food, and I'm excited to do some things for today before I have to go. Do you have an active IG? I have the same IG. I can go on it. I'll go on there. After I get off of here, I'll go on there. It's active, but I don't go on it often, but I can. Oh, all right. Love you guys. See you soon. Bye.